Well, welcome back to the workshop. This is an update. This is the first update using the new format, and for now I'm going to provide you with some pictures and a bit of voiceover just to let you know what happened in the last 3 or 4 months. In future updates I'll be recording as I go, and we'll have a bit of video for each week. The coolest thing that happened to me this last few months was a visit from Preso. Mark Presling and his wife Vanessa came to visit us in Tasmania, and we had a great time. We had some pastries and a good old chat around the table, and Mark enjoyed coming round and having a look at the workshop, I think. Here's a picture of Bill, who's a mate of mine. I'll leave a link to his channel below, and me and Preso and Mary and Megan. First section is new tools that I've acquired. I bought a bunch of things when I visited Emma in Launceston, and the first of those was this coolant pump and tank, and the purpose of that will become clear later on. This is a single phase pump. Also a lot of G-clamps, which are great for welding, and some abrasives for a 5-inch grinder. The 5-inch grinder itself that I bought from Emma, and some tooling for the larger lathe. Now this will become clearer later as well. Here's a bit of 4140, which is a nice turning steel. That was everything I got through Emma. Here's a few more things that I've got independently. This is a WNMG cutter on a 16mm shank. This is a nice size for a bit more rigid cutting than what I've been used to. Also some inserts that are suitable for aluminium. These are high rake inserts. And when it came to the big piece of steel that I bought, that you've seen in a previous update, well, I needed a way to cut that, and the best way seemed to be to use a larger grinder. So I picked up a 7-inch grinder, or a 175 or 180mm grinder, and it did the cut with ease. There will be a project video about that on the other channel, so I won't go into too much detail here. I picked up a nice big set of Mitutoyo vernier calipers. These are 300mm. Quite often my 150 and 200mm sets have not been big enough to do the job, and so 300 is a good start. I think I'd really like a set of 600mm ones at some point as well, but they're only needed occasionally. This is a large Dawn offset vise, and it's cast iron. They do also come in fabricated versions, and a friend of mine has one of those, and I saw it years ago, and I've been lusting after them ever since, and they cost way too much money. But this one came along for a good price, and so I grabbed it. This can go on the new big workbench. Okay, well the next big thing was a new machine that came to the workshop. I've been also lusting after the 12 by 36 inch sized Taiwanese lathes that Matty and Tom and others have been using. And my Primo is a good lathe, but there are a few downsides to it. The small bore and lots of other little things. It doesn't have a hardened bed and things like that. And so if the right one came along at the right price, I thought I'd grab it. And this is actually a 14 by 40, but it's basically the same sort of machine, and it's great. I haven't got it up and running yet, but it's here in the workshop, safe and sound, and very happy that I got it. It comes with both chucks, 3-jaw and 4-jaw. They're both 8-inch size or 200mm. It's got a nice deep bed, and it's hardened, and I can't see any wear on the bed. There is a little bit of wear on the corners of each thread on the lead screw, and the crossfeed nut will need replacing, but the crossfeed screw is in good condition. And yeah, it'll need a single phase conversion, which I'm actually part way through. But yeah, it'll be nice to get this up and running and make it replace the Primo. This is the motor I'm going to use. It's actually a 3-phase, 3-horsepower motor that used to be on the Shaper. The Shaper's getting a single phase, and the lathe would actually benefit from variable speed, so I'm going to use this motor, and I've bought a VFD to go with it, and I need to do some adapting and some wiring and so on. One of the challenges for me was to be able to move this lathe around because it's over 700 kilos. My other lathe is about 440, and I made a base for that that's got levelling feet and casters, and so I could roll that around on my own, just using hand power. But as far as this new lathe goes, I think 700 kilo is asking a bit much, So what I've done is acquired a bit of old 10mm thick 100 by 100 angle iron. That's 3/8 by 4" by 4". And I'm fabricating a base with some square legs on it. The main tray gets mitered and 4 legs get welded on. I'm using the TIG welder for this. This stuff is galvanized, so I've had to clean off the galvanizing. And the idea is now I can get the pallet jack under the front and shuffle it around. The new base doesn't have any provision for levelling the lathe, but it did allow me to just get the lathe out of the middle of the room quickly away from the crane so that I could do some paying work. Obviously the goal is to scoot it back to the middle of the room and set up some kind of levelling foot mechanism later on. So here's a picture of the lathe up against the mill so that you can see the size, the approximate size. It's a good size, and I don't think I'd want to run a bigger lathe in a home workshop really. Not without getting a special floor put in, that kind of thing. And when the Primo is gone, this is how the lathe corner will look. I'll have the big lathe on the left, and the spindle bore is usable because it sort of covers a doorway. I can use it when I need it, but it's not a waste of space when I don't need it. And I've got the MCO on the right. So that lathe still isn't finished. I've got to get the motor onto that. But otherwise, they're both pretty close to running. After having the lathe for a few weeks, couple of months, I decided to give it a bit more of a thorough clean. And this is showing the result of that. There is some damage on the paint, and I'm not worried about that at all. It's mostly covered in paint. But I wanted to get all the dirt off that I could. In this picture, the cross slide and carriage is about as clean as I'm going to get them, but underneath in the bed is only just lightly cleaned. This 3D printer is another new machine, or at least I think it's new to you guys. I've had it for 3 or 4 years and it's been in storage and I haven't really used it. It needed a bit of a repair, needed a new thermistor on the hot end, and needed a new little washer making to make the front end of this Y-axis pulley system sit straight. But now it's printing, and I can go through and calibrate everything and make sure it's running tip-top, and maybe even do some upgrades and improvements over the next few months. Here's a calibration cube that I've printed on the machine, and it's pretty accurate. Okay, this section is house improvements. Here is a picture of the kitchen in our place, and the previous owners had cut a big section out of the worktop and the upper cupboard and allowed space for an oversized fridge, and we didn't like this. The place needs a new kitchen, but we needed to make a temporary fix that will keep us going for the next year or two until we get into building new kitchens and stuff. So what I've done was cap the end of the cupboard off and put a piece of material in the floor and the wall and painted and filled to match, and made a little raised section of worktop so that the fridge can fit underneath. The old worktop, as you can see, is actually lower than standard, and that's part of the reason for the replacement kitchen. Is we're all tall people and this kitchen is designed for short people. Here's one of the several loads of insulation that I managed to buy, about half new price from a local guy. So this is stuff for the ceiling in the house, the upper ceiling, the attic. We're going to vastly improve what's there, and also we've got some insulation for the walls of the workshop. So the whole workshop perimeter is going to be insulated, and the internal walls too, to make the clean room a little bit soundproof, to make recording easier. The clean room will get heated as well, just slightly, just to take the chill off, and that'll benefit from the insulation in the walls too. A few days ago we had a bit of a flood. We had a couple of centimetres of water in certain areas in the workshop, and this was to do with a downpour where we had about a month's amount of rain in about an hour. So it was the rate of rainfall was incredible, and this flood helped us to notice a few areas around the house where the grading runs the wrong way and funnels water into the foundations, whereas what's needed is a runoff away from the house. So if water lands on this piece of ground here, it should run towards the path, not towards the foundations. So we're going to change this. We're going to get some clean fill soil and build up this area and seed it, and this should get rid of the surface runoff. Now we're on to the mini projects section. These are things that were too small to make a project video about, but probably worth sharing in an update video. This is a little plate that I've made to move the handle of my camera forwards, and so the handle is now above the centre of gravity. So I can let the camera hang, and any handheld movements I do are quite balanced and quite comfortable. It's just a square of aluminium with holes in the right place, threaded holes on one end and clearance holes on the other, but it works very well. Another mini project was I gave my bandsaw a birthday. I stripped out the worm gear and gearbox and cleaned out all the oil and grease and replaced it all. The plastic box that contains those switches you see, that was all smashed, so I've replaced that with a metal one. I've made the power cord a lot longer, and I've used a heavier gauge cord, and I've also bought 2 or 3 new bimetal blades for the saw. So everything is now clean and operating as well as it can, pretty much. And it's a joy to use this saw. One of the trips I went up to Emma's, and I was tired of using a lot of fuel in the car, so one of our cars uses twice the fuel of the other. So we managed to fit a tow ball and the power socket and everything onto the smaller car. So for lighter loads, that's a good fuel saver. And while we were up at Emma's, here's a picture of her mill. We'd picked this up and put it down on a pallet. Emma made the pallet, and we used some winches and chains to lift it up. And we added some panniers to the side. We just made these out of form ply and bits of scraps. And the idea was to keep all the tooling and accessories in the sides. For quite a while now, the drive mechanism of my mill has been a bit noisy. So what I've done is take it to bits and have a look at the quill and have a look at the splines on the top end of the spindle. And basically there's a fair amount of wear there. So what I did was dress all this material off. Some of it was sort of mushroomed out a little bit, and I think I've improved things, but what I need to do is some kind of rotating anti-backlash mechanism that sits on top of the spindle on the outside of the mill. And I've got some ideas for this, and this could be a future project, but we'll see. Another future project is I've only got this terrible way of moving my surface plate around at the moment, and it needs to live in the clean room, but while I'm building the clean room it's often in the way, and I can't get the pallet jack in and out of the room very easily with this on it while there's a doorway in place. So I have to get the surface plate out, and it's now outside the room, but what I'm going to do is build a better base for it that's got casters and still got the 3-point support for levelling it. This will mean I can easily move it in and out of the room without having to use the pallet jack. Another little mini project was I converted an old Bosch charger. This was a 110 volt model that a friend of mine bought on Amazon before Amazon was in Australia, and the charger was not being used, so I decided to gut it and replace the insides and make it into a discharger. So what there is an overcurrent circuit, an over discharge circuit, a voltage regulator, and basically it turns my 18 volts safely into 12 volts. And that means I can hook it up to my TV, which I use as a focus monitor, and when I'm filming I can now use this rig cordless, and that's ideal. I was always tripping over cords and flexes and things, so having the battery power for the TV is a great thing. It's quite an efficient TV, so one battery lasts several hours and it's not a problem. Here's how the camera rig works with the camera on the right and the adjustments in the middle and the TV on top. And you can see I've got a shading system there as well, which is just a cardboard box basically. But that's just a prototype. I've got a bit of black foam board which I'm going to use to make a better shade. In the interest of getting rid of leads and cables that I'm tripping over, I decided to run one across the ceiling and hang it down from a chain that's on a lag screw, and this provides power to my bandsaw and table saw. So this is a good safety upgrade too. Here's a bezel for a friend of mine. He's got a desk with a built-in power supply for his electronics work, and the opening was the wrong size for his power supply, so we made this bezel. It hasn't been polished in this picture, but you get the idea. It's just a plate with a hole in it. And in this section we're going to talk about the clean room. I've been framing the clean room, so that's the main piece of building progress that that I've done since the last video. Here's the dividing wall going in. It's bolted down to the concrete. It's bolted into the steel frame on the left. There's a notch in the bottom right over there, and it's actually spaced off the beam at the top just to account for any beam flex. On the second wall, if you're going clockwise around the clean room, there's a bit of masonry work which is leaves a bit to be desired, and there's a few holes and a bit of daylight coming through. So what I've done is scratch out all the loose stuff and deepen any slots that need to be filled. And what I've done is repoint this area. It's a bit of a messy result, but what I want to do is close the holes and stop any moisture or insects getting in, and strengthen the wall as much as possible. And here's the area in front of that wall, and you'll recognise the concrete and the retaining wall that I put in. The wall is sort of staggered by about 400mm or 16 inches, and this provides, well, it's either a lot of wasted space or a very useful storage space. So I decided to frame out the staggered area and create a recess in the wall that's full width and half the height of the wall, and this allows me to put some built-in shelves in that area. Here's a bigger view of that same area. What we've got is really the wall is made up of 5 panels, but it will be 3 surfaces when the lining is in. This area is about 3.6 meters wide and about 1.4 meters tall, something like that. And I intend to put 4 full-width hardwood shelves that are 300 to 400mm deep in this area, and this will become more or less a built-in bookcase and project storage and so on. Here's a look at the third wall going around the room, and on the right you can see some 16 or 18mm particle board which I'm going to use to line the room. That will be more soundproof than any 10mm stuff, and should make for nice recordings and things. I came across a deal on some lightly used carpet tiles which had been into an office refit, and then the office was refit again very soon after, so this stuff's hardly been used, and I paid a fraction of the new cost. I intend to put a set of carpet tiles upside down on the clean room floor, and that'll act as an underlay and provide something to stick the top layer to, and use some carpet tile glue and lay the top layer staggered halfway along and halfway across. And this should give me one big flat surface which is unlikely to delaminate, and should give me a nice comfortable and warm and quiet floor to work on in the clean room. Some of the power sockets have been moved around because they were sort of roughed in the first place, and now we've been living in the place for a while, we know what we need a bit more clearly. The clean room's receiving a lot of double sockets and a separate switched light bank and so on, and that's all done now. I'm pretty much at the stage where I need to insulate and line those walls. Here's one of those lengths of hardwood which I'm going to use for shelves. This is 5.4 meters long and I need about 3.6, so these get cut down and I end up with a lot of offcuts which will be useful for other projects. Here they are all cut down, and I've got more than enough here. These are all 25 to 28mm thick, and after stacking those neatly on one side I can see the floor of my workshop for the first time in a long time. There was a lot of welding stuff going on in the middle for some handrails that I've been building. Those are more than a mini project, so I'll make a separate project video about those, but it's quite exciting to see the floor again. And here's the insulation that's earmarked for the workshop area. There's something like 20 plus bags here, so it's quite a lot, and it's all different brands, but it's the right size and thickness and density, so it should be good. So this section is a look around the workshop just to see where things are at. And this is the grinding room, or abrasives room. You can see on the left I've got the sandblast, the D-bit grinder, and 3 bench grinders. Underneath I've got the Dremel, which is more or less an abrasives tool, and all my loose abrasives for metal. In the back corner I've got the tool and cutter grinder, which has not been touched since I got it home. All I've done is put it on something that's pallet compatible. And on the right I've decided to dedicate these 2 chrome shelves for this room because they're very abrasive friendly. They're made of metal, and any abrasive that lands on the shelf will fall through and make it easy to clean. And I've got angle grinders there for now, but this room will get more adjusted as time goes on. So one of the downsides of building a workshop while it's full of stuff is that there's materials everywhere all the time, and moving stuff around takes 3/4 of the time. So it's slow progress, but we're making forward progress, and I'm looking forward to getting the clean room sealed up.